The morning fog hung low over Heathrow Airport as Catherine, the Princess of Wales, adjusted her elegant navy coat one final time. The October air carried a crisp bite that reminded everyone autumn had truly arrived in London. She stood beside her husband, Prince William, on the tarmac of Terminal 4, both of them representing the very best of British royal tradition while embodying a modern approach to diplomacy. This wasn't just any ordinary Tuesday morning. Today marked a significant moment in Anglo-German relations as they prepared to welcome President Frank-Walter Steinmeier of Germany for a crucial state visit. The careful planning that had gone into this moment stretched back months, involving teams of protocol experts, security specialists, and diplomatic advisors from both nations. Catherine's choice of outfits spoke volumes about the careful thought behind every detail. Her midnight blue wool coat, crafted by a British designer, featured subtle silver threading that caught the morning light. The design honored both British craftsmanship and the formality required for welcoming a head of state. Her jewelry was equally purposeful pearl earrings that had belonged to the late Queen Elizabeth II, serving as a bridge between past and present royal traditions. William wore his Royal Air Force dress uniform, the navy blue fabric pristine and pressed to perfection. His chest bore the ribbons and decorations earned through years of service, each one representing dedication to duty that went far beyond ceremonial appearances. The choice to wear his military uniform sent a clear message about the seriousness with which the British royal family regarded this diplomatic moment. Airport officials moved with practiced precision around them. The usual chaos of Heathrow had been carefully orchestrated into something resembling organized calm. Passenger flights had been temporarily redirected to different terminals, creating an unusual sense of spaciousness in an airport known for its constant bustle. Security personnel, both visible and discreet, had positioned themselves throughout the area. Some wore the distinctive uniforms of the Metropolitan Police Protection Unit, while others blended seamlessly into the background. Their presence felt rather than seen. The German security detail had arrived hours earlier, working closely with their British counterparts to ensure every possible scenario had been planned for and addressed. Catherine found herself thinking about the historical significance of this moment. Anglo-German relations had traveled a complex path through the 20th century, marked by conflict, reconciliation, and ultimately partnership. Today's visit represented the fruits of decades of careful diplomatic work, building bridges that seemed impossible to construct in earlier eras. The princess had spent considerable time preparing for this encounter. Beyond the obvious protocol briefings and schedule reviews, she had immersed herself in German culture and current affairs. Her staff had arranged meetings with German cultural attachés, professors of European history, and even German families living in Britain who could provide insights into contemporary German perspectives on international relations. William had taken a similarly thorough approach to preparation. His background in diplomacy, honed through years of royal duties and his previous career in search and rescue, had taught him that successful international relations depended on understanding not just formal protocols, but also cultural nuances and personal dynamics. The sound of approaching aircraft engines drew their attention skyward. A sleek government aircraft appeared through the clouds, its approach carefully coordinated with air traffic control to ensure the smoothest possible arrival. The plane bore the distinctive markings of the German government, and its arrival marked the beginning of what diplomatic observers were already calling one of the most important bilateral visits of the year. Ground crews moved into position with military precision. The red carpet had been rolled out earlier, its deep crimson color providing a striking contrast against the gray tarmac. British and German flags stood at attention in the morning breeze, their colors bright against the overcast sky. Catherine touched the small piece of paper in her coat pocket, notes written in her own handwriting containing key phrases in German that she had been practicing. While she would conduct most conversations in English, she wanted to demonstrate respect for German culture by greeting President Steinmeier in his native language. The aircraft touched down smoothly, its wheels making contact with British soil in a moment that represented far more than simple arrival logistics. Inside that plane sat a leader who would spend the next 3 days engaged in discussions about trade, security, climate change, and the future of European cooperation in an increasingly complex global landscape. William checked his watch. Everything was proceeding exactly on schedule. The precision of royal protocol left nothing to chance, But he had learned that the most meaningful diplomatic moments often happened in the spaces between formal procedures. Those brief, unscripted exchanges where genuine human connection could flourish despite the formality of the occasion. The aircraft engines wound down, and ground crews moved to position the mobile stairs. Catherine and William took their designated positions, standing with the easy confidence that came from years of similar occasions, while maintaining the alert awareness that each diplomatic encounter brought its own unique opportunities and challenges. Behind them stood a carefully selected group of British officials. The Lord Chamberlain, responsible for royal household operations, stood ready to facilitate introductions. The Foreign Secretary had arrived earlier, bringing with him the weight of current British foreign policy priorities. Military attachés from both nations were present, representing the defense cooperation that formed a crucial component of the bilateral relationship. The aircraft door opened, revealing the first glimpses of the German delegation. Advanced security personnel emerged first, their eyes scanning the assembled crowd with professional thoroughness. Protocol officers followed, carrying the detailed schedules and arrangements that would govern every moment of the three-day visit. Catherine felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and responsibility that came with these high-stakes diplomatic encounters. Every gesture, every word, every expression would be observed and interpreted. Yet she had long ago learned to channel that awareness into positive energy rather than anxiety. The German ambassador to the United Kingdom appeared in the aircraft doorway, his presence serving as a bridge between the visiting delegation and their British hosts. His smile conveyed both satisfaction at the smooth arrival and anticipation for the productive days ahead. Behind him, more members of the German delegation became visible. William straightened slightly, not from nervousness, but from the automatic military bearing that years of service had ingrained. He understood that these ceremonial moments served a purpose beyond mere tradition. They created the psychological and emotional framework within which serious diplomatic work could flourish. The morning light, filtered through London's characteristic cloud cover, cast everything in soft tones that photographers would later describe as perfectly suited for the historic nature of the occasion. The red carpet stretched ahead like a path between two nations, ready to facilitate the first steps of what everyone hoped would be a highly successful state visit. Catherine's mind briefly wandered to the historical precedents for this moment. British royalty had welcomed German leaders before, but each occasion reflected the unique circumstances of its time. Today's welcome would be remembered as representative of a particular moment in European history, when cooperation and partnership seemed more essential than ever. The sound of approaching footsteps from within the aircraft indicated that President Steinmeier himself was preparing to appear. Catherine and William exchanged a quick glance, not nervous, but alert and ready. Years of partnership had taught them to communicate volumes with the briefest eye contact. Ground crews made final adjustments to equipment and positioning. Photographers and videographers, carefully positioned to capture the arrival without interfering with protocol, prepared their equipment. This moment would be documented from multiple angles and shared with audiences around the world within minutes of its occurrence. The autumn breeze carried the distinctive sounds of London distant traffic, aircraft engines, the subtle hum of a major international airport conducting business. But here on Terminal 4's tarmac, everything felt suspended in anticipation of the diplomatic theater about to unfold. William reflected on the careful balance required in these situations. Too much formality could feel cold and unwelcoming. Too little could seem disrespectful to the office and the occasion. The art lay in striking exactly the right tone, warm but dignified, personal but appropriately formal. Catherine had spoken with her staff about the particular challenges of welcoming a German head of state. Historical sensitivities required acknowledgement without dwelling on past conflicts. Contemporary German culture and achievements deserved celebration. The complexity of current European politics needed recognition without overshadowing the positive aspects of bilateral cooperation. The German delegation's arrival represented months of careful diplomatic preparation. Trade delegations, cultural exchanges, academic partnerships, and military cooperation agreements had all been reviewed and updated in preparation for this visit. The 3 days ahead would see the signing of new agreements and the renewal of existing partnerships. Security personnel reported through their earpieces that all preparations were complete and all systems were functioning properly. The elaborate security apparatus surrounding any meeting between heads of state and senior royals had been tested and retested, ensuring that nothing would interfere with the diplomatic proceedings. The aircraft's internal lights illuminated figures moving toward the exit. President Steinmeier's arrival was imminent, and with it, the beginning of a state visit that diplomatic observers on both sides of the English Channel were watching with considerable interest and optimism. Catherine smoothed her coat one final time and checked that her earrings were properly positioned. William adjusted his uniform jacket and stood ready. Together, they represented not just the British royal family, but the hopes and aspirations of a nation eager to maintain strong relationships with European partners during challenging global times. The moment was about to begin. President Frank-Walter Steinmeier appeared at the aircraft door, his distinguished figure silhouetted against the interior lighting. At 77, he carried himself with the dignity earned through decades of public service, from his early days as a civil rights lawyer to his current role as Germany's head of state. His silver hair was impeccably styled, and his dark overcoat spoke of German tailoring traditions that valued both quality and understatement. The president paused briefly at the top of the mobile stairs, taking in the scene before him. His experienced eyes quickly assessed the welcoming committee, the security arrangements, and the media presence. This moment represented the culmination of extensive diplomatic planning, and his slight smile suggested satisfaction with the arrangements his hosts had prepared. Catherine and William stepped forward in perfect synchronization, their movements reflecting years of practice in diplomatic protocol. They positioned themselves at the base of the red carpet, ready to offer the first official welcome that President Steinmeier would receive on British soil during this historic visit. The president began his descent, each step measured and confident. His wife, Elke Budenbender, appeared behind him, her presence adding warmth to the formal proceedings. As a judge in her own right, she brought intellectual gravitas to complement her husband's diplomatic experience. Her burgundy coat and matching accessories had been chosen with the same careful attention to detail that marked every aspect of this visit. The autumn wind caught the flags, sending the British and German colors streaming in a display that photographers captured from multiple angles. The symbolic power of those intertwined banners represented decades of patient relationship building between two nations that had traveled from conflict through reconciliation to partnership. William took the lead as the president reached the tarmac, extending his hand in greeting while offering the first words of welcome. "President Steinmeier, welcome to the United Kingdom. Princess Catherine and I are honored to greet you on behalf of His Majesty and the British people." His voice carried clearly across the tarmac, projecting both warmth and formality in precisely the right proportions. The president's handshake was firm and purposeful, his response delivered in excellent English accented with the careful precision that marked him as someone who took language seriously. "Your Royal Highness, thank you for this warm welcome. Mrs. Budenbender and I are delighted to be here and look forward to the productive discussions ahead." Catherine stepped forward for her introduction, offering her hand and switching smoothly into the German phrases she had been practicing. "Herr Bundespräsident, willkommen in Großbritannien." The effort to greet him in German brought a genuine smile to President Steinmeier's face, and his response came in rapid German that demonstrated his appreciation for her cultural gesture. The brief exchange in German served multiple purposes beyond mere courtesy. It signaled British respect for German culture and traditions. It demonstrated the personal investment that Catherine had made in preparing for this encounter. Most importantly, it created a moment of human connection that transcended the formal boundaries of diplomatic protocol. Elke Budenbender's introduction followed, conducted in a mixture of English and German that reflected the comfortable linguistic flexibility that characterized modern European diplomacy. Her conversation with Catherine revealed shared interests in legal reform and social justice issues, providing an immediate foundation for the personal relationships that often proved crucial to successful state visits. The formal introductions complete, the group began their measured procession along the red carpet toward the terminal building. Security personnel moved in carefully choreographed patterns around them, maintaining protective coverage while remaining as unobtrusive as possible. The balance between accessibility and security represented one of the ongoing challenges of modern diplomatic engagement. British officials stepped forward to be introduced to the German delegation. The Foreign Secretary's conversation with President Steinmeier immediately turned to current European challenges, touching on trade relationships, security cooperation, and climate change initiatives. These brief exchanges laid the groundwork for more detailed discussions scheduled for later in the visit. The German ambassador facilitated introductions between the two delegations, his role as cultural interpreter proving invaluable in navigating the subtle differences between British and German diplomatic styles. His long experience in London had taught him how to bridge not just linguistic differences, but also cultural expectations and communication patterns. Media representatives, positioned at designated locations along the route, captured every moment of the arrival ceremony. Their presence served the dual purpose of documenting the historic nature of the occasion while demonstrating the transparency that characterized democratic diplomatic engagement. The images being captured would appear in newspapers and television broadcasts around the world within hours. Catherine found herself engaged in conversation with Mrs. Budenbender about judicial reform initiatives in both countries. The German First Lady's background as a sitting judge provided unique perspectives on legal systems and social justice issues that went far beyond ceremonial discussions. Their exchange revealed the substantive nature that modern diplomatic relationships could achieve when personal expertise complemented official roles. William walked alongside President Steinmeier, their conversation touching on military cooperation between British and German forces. The president's questions about British defense capabilities and NATO partnership demonstrated the serious strategic discussions that would characterize the formal meetings ahead. Even these brief exchanges served to establish personal rapport and mutual respect. The procession moved at a pace that allowed for meaningful interaction while maintaining the schedule that governed every aspect of the visit. Diplomatic protocol demanded precision in timing, but human relationship building required flexibility for genuine connection. The art lay in achieving both objectives simultaneously. Airport officials who had spent weeks preparing for this moment watched with satisfaction as their careful planning unfolded flawlessly. Every detail, from carpet positioning to security coordination to media management, had been rehearsed and refined. The smooth execution of the arrival ceremony created the positive atmosphere essential for productive diplomatic engagement. The terminal building ahead had been transformed for the occasion. British and German flags hung in prominent positions, while carefully selected artwork represented both nations' cultural achievements. The space had been reconfigured to accommodate the security requirements and ceremonial needs of a state visit, while maintaining the functionality necessary for the busy international airport. As they walked, President Steinmeier commented on the efficiency and warmth of his reception, expressing particular appreciation for the personal touches that marked British hospitality. His observations about the careful attention to detail and cultural sensitivity demonstrated the diplomatic experience that had made him such an effective representative of German interests. The conversation between the two couples revealed shared commitments to environmental sustainability, social justice, and international cooperation. These common values provided the foundation for addressing more challenging issues where British and German perspectives might differ. The personal connections being established would prove crucial when difficult negotiations required trust and mutual respect. Security personnel reported through their communication systems that all phases of the arrival had proceeded according to plan. The successful completion of the airport ceremony marked the first milestone in a visit that would include meetings with senior government officials, cultural events, and economic discussions that could shape bilateral relationships for years to come. The German delegation's advance team, which had worked closely with British counterparts for months, observed with satisfaction as their careful coordination produced the seamless execution that both sides had hoped to achieve. Every detail, from transportation logistics to communication protocols, had been planned and rehearsed to ensure nothing would interfere with the diplomatic objectives. Catherine's conversation with Mrs. Budenbender had moved beyond judicial issues to discuss educational initiatives and cultural exchange programs. Both women shared backgrounds in professional life before assuming their current roles, creating common ground for discussing the challenges and opportunities of representing their nations on the international stage. The media coverage being generated by the arrival would establish the tone for reporting on the entire visit. The positive images and respectful coverage reflected the careful media management that both sides had coordinated. The story being told through these images emphasized cooperation, friendship, and mutual respect between two important European nations. William's military experience proved valuable in his discussions with President Steinmeier about defense cooperation and security challenges facing European nations. The president's thoughtful questions about British perspectives on NATO cooperation and regional security demonstrated the serious strategic thinking that would characterize their formal meetings. The arrival ceremony was reaching its conclusion as they approached the terminal entrance. What had begun as a formal diplomatic protocol had evolved into genuine human interaction marked by warmth, respect, and shared purposes. The successful establishment of personal rapport created the ideal foundation for the substantial diplomatic work that lay ahead. As they prepared to transition from the public arrival ceremony to private transportation, both couples exchanged final pleasantries that reinforced the positive atmosphere established during their first meeting. The careful balance between formality and warmth had been struck perfectly, creating exactly the tone that diplomatic professionals on both sides had hoped to achieve. The next phase of the visit would take them away from the media attention and public ceremony into more intimate settings where the real work of diplomacy could begin. The motorcade that would transport President Steinmeier and his delegation from Heathrow to central London represented a masterpiece of security planning and diplomatic courtesy. British authorities had coordinated with their German counterparts to create a transportation arrangement that balanced protection requirements with the dignity appropriate for a head of state visit. The lead vehicle in the convoy was President Steinmeier's official state car, a Mercedes-Benz armored limousine that had accompanied him from Germany. Its presence in the motorcade demonstrated the trust between British and German security services, while its distinctive German diplomatic plates reminded observers of the international nature of this visit. The vehicle's advanced security features and communication equipment would keep the president connected to both German and British officials throughout the journey. Catherine and William traveled in their own official vehicle, positioned strategically within the convoy to maintain appropriate protocol while enabling continued conversation with their distinguished guests. Their Jaguar, bearing Royal Standard flags, represented British automotive excellence while providing the security and comfort required for diplomatic transportation. The route from Heathrow to London had been carefully selected and thoroughly secured. Metropolitan police officers positioned at strategic intervals ensured smooth traffic flow while maintaining the visibility that demonstrated British commitment to transparent democratic governance. Road closures had been minimal, reflecting sensitivity to public convenience while ensuring adequate security for the visiting dignitaries. As the motorcade began its journey, President Steinmeier observed the London landscape passing outside his windows with the keen interest of someone who understood that successful diplomacy required deep appreciation for local culture and conditions. His comments about British architecture and urban planning revealed the breadth of knowledge that had made him such an effective international representative. The German delegation members in accompanying vehicles included senior diplomatic staff, security personnel, and economic advisors who would participate in the substantial discussions planned for the coming days. Their presence in London represented Germany's commitment to strengthening bilateral relationships across multiple areas of cooperation and shared interest. William used the travel time to brief President Steinmeier on some of the locations they would pass during their journey to central London. His descriptions of historical sites and contemporary developments provided cultural context, while demonstrating the depth of preparation that had gone into making the visit both productive and meaningful for their distinguished guests. Catherine's conversation with Mrs. Budenbender continued themes they had begun at the airport, focusing particularly on educational partnerships between British and German institutions. Both women shared interests in promoting international academic exchange and cultural understanding, areas where their personal involvement could complement the official diplomatic agenda. The security convoy moved through West London with precision timing that reflected months of coordination between multiple agencies. Traffic management systems had been adjusted to ensure smooth flow, while minimizing disruption to ordinary Londoners going about their daily business. The balance between security requirements and public convenience represented a crucial aspect of conducting diplomacy in democratic societies. Radio communications between vehicles and command centers provided constant updates on route conditions and security status. The sophisticated communication networks connecting British and German security services demonstrated the level of cooperation and trust that had developed between the two nations' law enforcement and diplomatic protection services. President Steinmeier's questions about British economic conditions and social policies revealed his preparation for the substantive discussions that would occur during his stay. His inquiries about housing policy, employment trends, and environmental initiatives showed genuine interest in understanding contemporary British challenges and opportunities. The motorcade's passage through London neighborhoods provided opportunities for spontaneous public interactions that had not been scripted, but were carefully managed by security personnel. British citizens who happened to see the convoy often waved or showed other signs of welcome, gestures that President Steinmeier acknowledged with appreciation for British hospitality. The journey allowed time for informal discussions about shared challenges facing European nations, from demographic changes to technological disruption to climate change adaptation. These conversations, conducted away from media attention and formal protocol, often proved most valuable for establishing the personal trust essential to effective international cooperation. Mrs. Budenbender's observations about London's cultural diversity and architectural heritage demonstrated the careful research she had conducted in preparation for the visit. Her thoughtful questions about British legal traditions and judicial independence reflected her professional background while showing respect for British institutional achievements. As they traveled through areas of London that reflected both historical grandeur and contemporary dynamism, William shared stories that illustrated the evolution of British society and culture. His narratives provided context that would enhance President Steinmeier's understanding of the environment in which their diplomatic discussions would take place. The security measures surrounding the motorcade were extensive but discreet, reflecting British expertise in protecting visiting dignitaries while maintaining the accessibility that characterized democratic governance. Specialist units from various law enforcement agencies coordinated their efforts to ensure comprehensive protection without creating unnecessary barriers between officials and citizens. Catherine's discussion with the German First Lady touched on environmental sustainability, initiatives that both women supported in their respective roles. Their shared commitment to addressing climate change and promoting renewable energy provided common ground for exploring how British and German cooperation could advance these crucial objectives. The route planning had incorporated opportunities for President Steinmeier to observe British infrastructure projects and urban development initiatives that reflected government priorities and social values. These visual introductions to British domestic policies would inform the economic and social discussions scheduled for later in the visit. Communication systems in the vehicles kept both delegations connected to their respective capitals and to the detailed schedules that governed every aspect of the state visit. The sophisticated technology enabled real-time coordination while ensuring that security and diplomatic requirements were continuously met throughout the journey. The conversation between William and President Steinmeier revealed shared concerns about international security challenges and opportunities for enhanced military cooperation. Their discussion of NATO commitments and European defense initiatives laid groundwork for more detailed strategic conversations that would occur in formal meetings with defense officials. As the motorcade approached central London, the urban landscape became denser and more historically significant. The president's questions about landmark buildings and cultural sites demonstrated his appreciation for the historical depth that would provide context for their contemporary diplomatic engagement. The German security details coordination with British protective services exemplified the professional cooperation that had developed between the two nations' law enforcement agencies. Their seamless integration into British security arrangements reflected years of joint training and shared operational experience in international diplomatic protection. Mrs. Budenbender's insights about German educational policies and judicial reforms provided Catherine with valuable perspectives on approaches to social challenges that both nations faced. Their exchange of ideas about best practices in government and civil society demonstrated the substantive value that personal relationships could bring to official diplomatic engagement. The timing of the motorcade's arrival in central London had been precisely calculated to coordinate with the next phase of the visit schedule. The successful completion of the journey from Heathrow represented another milestone in the careful orchestration of events designed to maximize both security and diplomatic effectiveness. Radio reports from advance teams confirmed that all arrangements for the next phase of the visit were proceeding according to plan. The transition from airport arrival to central London activities would maintain the positive momentum established during the initial welcome ceremony while moving toward more substantive diplomatic engagement. As they approached their destination, both couples prepared for the transition from private conversation to public engagement. The journey had provided valuable time for personal relationship building that would enhance all subsequent interactions during the 3-day visit. The successful completion of the secure transportation phase demonstrated the professional excellence of British diplomatic and security services while creating optimal conditions for the important work that lay ahead. The stage was now set for the substantive discussions that would define the success of this historic state visit. The motorcade arrived at Buckingham Palace as autumn sunlight broke through London's characteristic cloud cover, casting the iconic facade in warm tones that photographers would later describe as perfectly suited for this historic diplomatic moment. The palace, with its 775 rooms and centuries of royal history, provided a setting that spoke to both British tradition and the continuity of international relationships that had weathered decades of change. Palace guards in their distinctive red tunics and bearskin hats stood at attention as the vehicles passed through the grand entrance gates. Their presence represented not just ceremonial tradition, but the living continuation of British military heritage that had evolved through centuries of conflict and cooperation with European neighbors, including Germany. President Steinmeier's first view of the palace courtyard revealed the careful preparation that palace staff had undertaken for his arrival. British and German flags flew side by side from prominent positions, their colors bright against the palace's Portland stone facade. The symbolic arrangement communicated respect for German sovereignty while demonstrating the warm welcome that Britain extended to its important European partner. The master of the household emerged to greet the arriving delegation, his role representing the bridge between royal tradition and contemporary diplomatic practice. His extensive experience in managing state visits had taught him how to blend historical protocol with modern requirements for security, accessibility, and cultural sensitivity. Catherine and William accompanied their guests through the palace's grand entrance, where the architecture itself told stories of British history and international engagement. The marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings created an atmosphere of dignified grandeur that provided appropriate context for discussions between democratic leaders about the future of European cooperation. The German delegation's security detail worked seamlessly with palace protection officers to maintain comprehensive coverage while respecting the cultural significance of their surroundings. Their professional cooperation reflected the deep trust that had developed between British and German law enforcement agencies through decades of joint operations and shared training exercises. President Steinmeier's appreciation for the palace's artistic treasures became evident as he paused to examine particular paintings and decorative objects that reflected British cultural achievements. His thoughtful questions about historical periods and artistic techniques demonstrated the intellectual curiosity that had marked his approach to international engagement throughout his distinguished career. Mrs. Budenbender's conversation with Catherine revealed shared interests in supporting artistic institutions and cultural education programs. Both women had used their positions to promote cultural exchange and artistic development, creating natural opportunities for discussing how British and German institutions might enhance their cooperative efforts. The blue drawing room, selected for their initial private reception, showcased some of the royal collection's finest examples of diplomatic gifts exchanged between British and German leaders over the centuries. These historical artifacts provided tangible reminders of the long relationship between the two nations, including both difficult periods and times of close cooperation. Palace staff moved with practiced efficiency to ensure that every detail of the reception proceeded according to carefully planned schedules, while maintaining the flexibility necessary for genuine diplomatic conversation. Their expertise in managing high-stakes international encounters ensured that nothing would interfere with the relationship building that represented the visit's primary objective. The conversation between President Steinmeier and William touched on environmental challenges facing both nations, particularly regarding renewable energy development and climate change adaptation strategies. The president's detailed knowledge of British environmental policies demonstrated the thorough preparation that German officials had undertaken for this visit. Security personnel maintained discreet positions throughout the palace while remaining in constant communication with command centers that monitored the broader security situation across London. The sophisticated coordination between multiple agencies ensured comprehensive protection without creating barriers that might interfere with diplomatic effectiveness. Catherine's discussion with Mrs. Budenbender explored opportunities for enhanced educational partnerships between British and German universities, particularly in fields related to international law and human rights advocacy. Both women's professional backgrounds provided foundation for substantive conversation that went far beyond ceremonial pleasantries. The palace's atmosphere of historical continuity provided perfect context for discussions about how traditional diplomatic relationships could address contemporary challenges. The building itself represented the evolution of British institutions through centuries of change, while maintaining essential values of democratic governance and international cooperation. Staff members responsible for cultural programming had arranged displays of German artistic works from the royal collection, demonstrating British appreciation for German cultural contributions, while highlighting the long history of artistic exchange between the two nations. These carefully selected pieces provided conversation starters while reinforcing themes of mutual respect and shared heritage. President Steinmeier's observations about palace architecture and decorative arts revealed his deep appreciation for British cultural achievements, while his questions about conservation efforts demonstrated understanding of the challenges facing institutions responsible for preserving national heritage. His thoughtful engagement reflected the intellectual depth that had made him such an effective diplomatic representative. The timing of events within the palace had been coordinated with military precision while maintaining the relaxed atmosphere necessary for productive relationship building. Palace staff had learned through decades of experience how to balance protocol requirements with the human elements that made diplomatic encounters successful. Communication systems throughout the palace kept both delegations connected to their respective governments while enabling real-time coordination of schedules and security arrangements. The sophisticated technology operated invisibly behind the scenes, allowing focus to remain on diplomatic objectives rather than technical logistics. William's military background proved valuable in his conversations with President Steinmeier about defense cooperation and security partnerships between British and German forces. Their discussion of NATO obligations and European defense initiatives laid important groundwork for more detailed strategic conversations scheduled with defense officials later in the visit. The German delegation's advance team observed with satisfaction as their months of coordination with palace officials produced the seamless experience they had hoped to achieve. Every aspect of the reception, from security arrangements to cultural programming, reflected the careful attention to detail that characterized successful diplomatic engagement. Mrs. Budenbender's insights about German approaches to social justice and judicial reform provided Catherine with valuable perspectives on addressing challenges that both nations faced. Their exchange of ideas about best practices in government policy and civil society engagement demonstrated how personal relationships could enhance official diplomatic cooperation. The reception's informal atmosphere enabled conversations that moved beyond scripted talking points to address genuine areas of mutual interest and concern. These authentic exchanges often proved more valuable than formal meetings in establishing the trust and understanding necessary for effective long-term cooperation. Palace catering staff had prepared refreshments that honored both British traditions and German preferences, demonstrating the cultural sensitivity that marked every aspect of the visit's planning. The selection of foods and beverages reflected extensive consultation with German cultural attachés to ensure appropriate hospitality. As the reception continued, both couples found themselves engaged in discussions that revealed shared commitments to democratic values, international cooperation, and addressing global challenges through multilateral approaches. These common foundations provided the basis for addressing more complex issues where British and German perspectives might differ. The success of this initial reception within the palace created the positive momentum that diplomatic professionals on both sides had hoped to establish. The warm, personal relationships developing between the couples would enhance all subsequent interactions during the remaining phases of the state visit. Security reports indicated that all aspects of the palace reception were proceeding according to plan, with no incidents or disruptions to interfere with diplomatic objectives. The professional excellence of British protective services was enabling the kind of relaxed but secure environment essential for productive international engagement. As they prepared to transition to the next phase of the visit's schedule, both delegations expressed satisfaction with the reception's success in establishing personal rapport and substantive dialogue. The foundation had been laid for the important work that would occur during the formal meetings and cultural events planned for the days ahead. The formal state banquet that evening transformed Buckingham Palace's ballroom into a showcase of British hospitality and international friendship. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across tables adorned with carefully selected flowers that honored both British gardening traditions and German cultural preferences. The meticulous attention to every detail reflected months of coordination between palace staff and German protocol experts. President Steinmeier and Mrs. Budenbender entered the ballroom alongside Catherine and William, their entrance marking the culmination of a day that had successfully established both personal rapport and substantive diplomatic dialogue. The assembled guests represented the breadth of British and German society, from government officials and business leaders to cultural figures and academic representatives. The guest list itself told a story of British-German cooperation across multiple sectors. German expatriates who had built successful careers in Britain sat alongside British academics who specialized in German studies. Business executives, whose companies operated in both nations, were positioned near cultural ambassadors who promoted artistic exchange between the two countries. Catherine's choice of attire for the evening reflected careful consideration of both British royal tradition and respect for German sensibilities. Her elegant gown, created by a British designer using sustainable materials, demonstrated contemporary environmental consciousness while honoring the formality required for such significant diplomatic occasions. The tiara she wore had belonged to Princess Diana, adding personal significance to the historical continuity of royal diplomatic service. William wore the full dress uniform of his honorary colonelcy, the formal military attire appropriate for state occasions, while representing his continued commitment to military values and international security cooperation. His decorations included honors received from various European nations, visible symbols of the international partnerships that formed the foundation of modern European security. President Steinmeier's remarks during the formal toast addressed themes that had emerged throughout the day's conversations: the importance of democratic values, the necessity of international cooperation in addressing global challenges, and the special relationship that had developed between Britain and Germany through decades of patient relationship building. His words carried particular weight given his personal history as someone who had lived through Germany's reunification and subsequent emergence as a leading European democracy. His perspective on the importance of maintaining strong transatlantic and European partnerships resonated strongly with British officials who shared similar commitments to multilateral engagement. The menu for the evening had been carefully crafted to honor both British culinary traditions and German preferences. Palace chefs had worked with German cultural attachés to create dishes that demonstrated British hospitality while acknowledging German tastes and dietary considerations. Each course told a story of cultural exchange and mutual respect. Musical entertainment provided by a combined British and German ensemble demonstrated the cultural cooperation that complemented diplomatic and economic partnerships. The selection of pieces included works by composers from both nations, performed by musicians who had trained in each other's countries and represented the living reality of cultural exchange. Catherine's toast in response to President Steinmeier's remarks emphasized the personal friendships that had developed during the day while acknowledging the substantial policy discussions that would continue throughout the visit. Her ability to speak both personally and diplomatically reflected the modern evolution of royal involvement in international relations. The conversations occurring at tables throughout the ballroom revealed the breadth of interests that connected British and German societies. Academic researchers discussed collaboration on climate change studies, while business leaders explored opportunities for enhanced trade relationships. Cultural figures shared plans for artistic exchanges that would bring British and German creative communities together. Mrs. Budenbender's presence added particular depth to the evening's significance, as her background as a sitting judge provided unique perspectives on legal cooperation and rule of law issues that both nations considered fundamental to their partnership. Her conversations with British legal experts established foundations for enhanced judicial collaboration. The security arrangements for the banquet demonstrated the sophisticated coordination between British and German protective services that had characterized the entire visit. Personnel from both nations worked seamlessly together to ensure comprehensive coverage while maintaining the relaxed atmosphere necessary for productive diplomatic and social interaction. Palace staff observed with satisfaction as their months of preparation culminated in an evening that successfully balanced formal protocol with genuine warmth and hospitality. The positive atmosphere enabled conversations that moved beyond ceremonial pleasantries to address substantial issues of mutual interest and concern. The historical significance of the ballroom itself provided appropriate context for discussions about the future of European cooperation. The space had hosted diplomatic receptions for centuries, serving as a venue where international relationships had been forged and strengthened through both challenging and prosperous times. William's conversations with German military attachés touched on operational cooperation between British and German forces, particularly regarding NATO commitments and European defense initiatives. These discussions reinforced themes that had emerged throughout the day about the importance of security partnerships in addressing contemporary threats. The evening's success created momentum for the substantial policy discussions scheduled for the following day. The personal relationships established between delegation members would enhance all subsequent interactions, enabling more candid dialogue about complex issues where British and German perspectives might differ. Media coverage of the banquet emphasized the warmth and mutual respect that had characterized all interactions during the first day of the visit. The positive imagery being generated would help shape public understanding of the visit's significance while demonstrating the value of continued British-German cooperation. The cultural program accompanying the dinner showcased artistic talents from both nations while highlighting collaborative projects that brought British and German creative communities together. These presentations demonstrated how cultural exchange complemented diplomatic and economic cooperation in building strong bilateral relationships. As the formal portions of the evening concluded, informal conversations continued among guests who had found common interests and shared commitments. These spontaneous interactions often proved most valuable for generating new ideas and identifying opportunities for enhanced cooperation across various sectors. The transition from public ceremonial events to private diplomatic work had been accomplished successfully, creating optimal conditions for the substantive discussions that would define the visit's long-term impact. The foundation of personal trust and mutual respect established during the first day would prove crucial for addressing challenging policy issues. President Steinmeier's final comments of the evening expressed appreciation for British hospitality, while noting the substantial progress already achieved in strengthening bilateral relationships. His optimism about the potential for enhanced cooperation reflected the positive atmosphere that had characterized all interactions throughout the day. Security personnel reported that all phases of the first day had proceeded without incident, enabling complete focus on diplomatic objectives rather than security concerns. The professional excellence demonstrated by both British and German protective services had created the secure environment necessary for productive international engagement. The success of the arrival ceremony, palace reception and state banquet established the positive momentum that both sides had hoped to achieve. The remaining days of the visit would build upon these foundations to address specific policy initiatives and explore new opportunities for British-German cooperation. As guests departed the palace, the consensus among both delegations was that the first day had exceeded expectations in terms of establishing personal relationships and creating conditions for productive diplomatic work. The careful planning and professional execution had created exactly the atmosphere needed for successful international cooperation. The stage was now set for the substantive policy discussions that would determine the visit's long-term impact on British-German relations and European cooperation more broadly. The personal trust established during these initial interactions would prove invaluable when addressing complex challenges requiring mutual understanding and shared commitment to common objectives.